Einen schönen guten Tag.
Good afternoon. Now with these studies where you have to say one or two, I mean, these kind of questions, that's always a bit critical, especially if you wanted to say 1.5. And I think you're both right, whether or not you pressed 1 or 2. We're talking about the Germans traveling in 2025, and I can tell you now, and this is the last piece of my presentation, the Germans will prove to be very reliable in their travel behavior, and you can be sure that demand will remain high. Germany is one of the most important source markets worldwide. Stable demand also means that it's not a growth market. Demand just remains high, so not much growth is to be expected. This means that the travel providers are in strong competition. On the one hand, we have domestic destinations, and on the other hand, destinations abroad. And then on the other hand, you also will be seeing online sources being used in the future and direct booking instruments. Demand structure is quite dynamic, although the volume will remain the same. That is, of course, due to demographic change and also experienced travelers. And consumers also have very many options, very many wishes, possibilities to fulfill their desires. We'll have to talk about that. And all that means that the potential the market has will not just be unlocked automatically, but that you have to be customer-centered. So if the next presentation isn't interesting for you, then you could leave now, because now I'm just going to tell you the same thing in detail. So how come do I know this, and how do I dare say this? Now, I work at a research institute. We research tourism. We just heard that. It's in Kiel. There we have the sea, which we find very beautiful. And in this institute in Kiel, we deal with tourists. So we do consumer behavior studies in tourism in Germany, but we don't care about the type of tourists. Just the important thing is that they go on holidays. Now, one of the most important instruments to research and better understand the traveler's behavior is the travel analysis, and we have presented the first results. We presented them last week. You can see this little brochure. You will find some at the back on the table. Some of them of you have seen them, and these are the latest data. I don't want to tell you about that, but we're going to talk about long-term developments. Now, this analysis, travel analysis, is an instrument which has been in existence for 45 years. So on Wednesday, we celebrated 45 years, and it is a study on long or short trips, holiday trips, preparation for this, motivation, preferences, and always focused on Germany. And we have lots of empirical data, so we question more than 12,500 people per year in Germany, and that over 45 years. This is a non-commercial project, and the association of FUR, when it does gain some income, then it's reinvested immediately. And we have national tourist officers, tour providers, operators, airlines, media, and these are our partners who focus on the contents of our research. So in a way, we have user-generated content here, because what our questions target on is what the industry is interested in. Now, Germany is something which can make you understand how the most important source market in the world works. You can learn about behavior, motivation, attitudes, preferences, and you can also find out about future potentials for destinations or types of holidays. And you can see where the preferences are, how competition works, and you can gain insights in long-term developments. But before you get started, you'll have to know where we started from, so what demand is today. This is the travel intensity of Germans beginning in the early 1950s until this day. There we have about 3 out of 4 Germans going on holiday every year. Hardly anything has changed over the past 20 years. In the 1980s, of course, we had seen an increase, but over the past 20 years that was not the case. This is the number of travelers, Germans, going on holiday since 1971. And here to the right, you can see that from the mid-1990s onwards, we haven't seen much change. We have 17 million every year, but we haven't seen much growth, although this is quite a high number. And we can see a kind of, for example, sold Christmas trees in Germany between 2000 and 2014, and that's about the same structure. So 15 years ago, we had slight increase in demand, and then since then, it's been stable. And I'm not doing this just this is not just nonsense or nonsensical, but this is demand, which is also very much a question of habit. And so if you think about changing conditions, the economic situation or political situation, terrorism, volcanoes exploding, then of course habit might be an explanation why nothing has changed. That means that in 2014, we again had about 17 million holidays and a turnover of about 67 billion euros. Then we have short trips, so that adds up to more than 90 billion euros, so quite a lot of money. But now we're not trying to find out about the status quo, but about the future, and there we will have to dig quite deep. And trends may tell us what the future will look like. Maybe, you know, the regrounding. Is that a trend? Is regrounding a trend? I can see you're really enthusiastic here. Yes, of course it's a trend. It's something like urban gardening, and it's a trend which has a high impact on our society. So these trends show us what the future will look like, which direction it will take, and where you have to focus. So researching trends, we always have kind of double trends. There's a trend and there's a counter trend always. And then maybe you can lose touch and forget where the direction is heading for. And but luckily we have Skift. This is reappeared this year. So it's a mega trend report defining travel in 2015. And there you can see the trends. So this is the table of contents, alternative travel, reality across the world, mobile is moving, downsizing on design. These are this year's trends. Now, whether that's correct or not is something we cannot make up our mind on yet because the year is still very young. But we looked back on trendwatching.com. This is a US-American website. And here I will show you 2012's trends. And you will immediately see that those were the trends which really had an impact on tourism. Just read through this, and you will certainly remember these mega trends. So this will not really help us. One problem is that there are so many trends. I mean, one trend would help us, but so many trends, that's quite confusing. Very often it says this as well as that. Very dialectical, so not very helpful. Very often we have conclusions based on plausibility and derived from the past. And very often the starting point is not clearly defined as to where the trend supposedly begins. And also it's not part of the history. And then there's a strong emphasis on what's changing and less on what is remaining stable. So planning the future basically is founded on reliable factors. What can I be sure about for the future? And I'd like to ask you something, although that didn't work out too well previously. What do you think? What would consumers like to eat in April 2017? Well, hasn't worked. Let me try again. What do you think consumers would like to eat in April 2017? It's not working. Usually it works. What about May? May 2017? Good job. So I don't have a picture of schnitzel or fried potatoes or anything. No, it had to be asparagus. And then as a dessert, strawberries. So you can be sure about this. You can rely on this or nearly. So if you know that consumers like to eat asparagus in May, then the farmer can try to extend the season and start having asparagus in April, or turning over to more healthy asparagus. So going over to organic farming. So we try to use reliable data, and then how do we make our prospects for the future? We have data-based considering. That's what we talk about. So we use the data, we think about it. We take the data, we think about it. And what you need is reliable, robust data from the past, and you have to also think about what these data mean. So to give you an example, here on the left we have the developments in the past of the holiday intensity of the Germans. It's oscillating a bit. There are several reasons for this. And then we have a kind of a curve. We calculate, thinking as to where it will probably be going, and then we make some estimations, because we know that in Germany we don't have only Germans but also foreigners living there, and they're important also for the market. And then on the right we have the extension of the trend, but on the other hand we can see that there's a kind of a spectrum where we might have some flexibility into thinking what might mitigate or further increase the developments. So we know that we need to sometimes correct this kind of corridor in which the development will probably take place. So this is what it will look like. Now, tourism demand in 2025 is projected. We'll look just at the middle here. So 70 million of Germans. There we will have about 70.5 German-speaking population wanting to go on holiday. This is what it says here. This is for 2014. There we had 70.5, and 2025 we're expecting 70, so it'll be the same number of holidays, probably. Of course, the number of holiday travels will probably sink a little bit, and that is because people go on holiday less often. That has its reason in our socio-demographic development. So people will have to work longer when they're not yet quite old. They will have to work longer per year and per week, and that will lead to the fact that we'll have 1.25 rather than 1.29 trips per holiday traveler, which is not a large share, but of course we're talking about big numbers, so it does make a change. Now look at the age structure. Here we have the change between 2013 and 2025, and of course we have demographic change. So there will be more older people going on holidays, and there'll be fewer people in the middle of the age pyramid. And that will mean that in 2025, about 40% of travel demand will be demanded by people above 60 years old, but we're already at 30%. So demographic change in tourism will not make things change drastically. It will rather be the increase of a trend which is already to be seen. Now, where are people going to go to? Destinations. Now, let's look back into the past. Now we're looking at domestic and foreign travel, and there we have 30, 70, 32, 68, that sort of thing. So 1/3, 2/3, 2/3 abroad, 1/3 in Germany. And here we have some projections, and I gave you a whole table on purpose so that you don't think that we thought, okay, everything is going to remain as it is. But we really did lots and lots of calculations, but in the end we can see that it's basically constant. But that also is a challenge, because here to the right you can see estimations as to what's going to be happening in 2025. Again, it'll be 33, 67%, so a little bit more domestic destinations, so 1.5 million more trips in Germany. But since it's the total number is smaller, that means it's a decrease of 2.6 million of trips abroad. Now, that's not too much when we're talking about 70 million. It's not dramatic, but it does mean 2.6 million. And if you pay 1,000 euros per trip, then that's quite a lot of money missing. Now, the chart also doesn't show that the destinations abroad also develop. For example, people will travel longer distances so that the European destinations will be fewer. So more domestic travels, less traveling abroad. Now, the 5 most important destinations abroad over the past 13 years, and you can see that the situation is relatively stable, not many up and downs. And developments as projected for 2025, there we will say that the 5 largest destinations will remain large. We could add that France is being maybe caught up by Croatia and Greece, but the other 4, Spain, Italy, Turkey, and Austria, will remain stable. Now, our projections for the future were also based on the interest as pronounced every year. So we had divided this into larger groups, Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, or whatever, and you can see that in every region the interest is rising. So you can ask Germans, would you like to go there? And they'll always say yes. They'll say yes more often than they did 10 years ago. And it doesn't really matter what you're asking them, so what that means, would you like to go there? So we're interested in ever more destinations, but the interest is a bit less determined. You can say, yes, I could imagine going there, not so much in the category, yes, certainly we're going there next year. So this rising interest, but being more vague about it, yeah, I could consider going there, that has a certain impact. You can understand that with certain destinations, I could go to the Black Forest area, but I could also imagine going to Turkey, or Sweden would be nice. So this is all quite vague. And it's easy to understand that. And the consumer then, of course, would not have to find the offers in Sweden or the Black Forest. Then Travel Zoo people or whatever will certainly help us. But I, as a consumer, want to decide which motivation I'm going to follow up on, because everything is so attractive. So here we're talking about multi-optionality. That means we need information and organization. And here again, I'd like to give you some figures projected for the future so that you have an idea of what you will find in our trend study. Here it's about internet use as a platform for information and booking. And these are not percentages you can see, but millions. And in 2025, you can translate this table as to everybody will be using the internet. A traveler not using the internet, or an internet user not using the internet for traveling in 2025, that will be the big exception. And that exception will probably be somebody going to his own private holiday house at the Baltic. Unless, of course, he or she books a train ticket, and then, of course, he or she will have used the internet again to get there. So the internet will be standard as a medium. And availability of information on the internet with our multi-optionality we have also in smaller areas is quite a bit of a challenge, because now we do know how many offers there are, but we still don't know what we're going to choose because we're not quite sure what we actually want. Now, the organizational form. Now, what do you think? Package traveling, has that died between 2005 and today? And there we differentiated between the Mediterranean area and domestic travels. You see the green lines, those are these modules or package tours of the past 10 years. And you can see the Mediterranean, it's right up, it's above 70% with some oscillations. And then there's the blue line, which is maybe also important, where individual products were directly booked. For example, airlines or something, there we have a certain increase. Now in Germany, the picture is completely different. We see the blue line rising and the green line sinking. And there'd be a third category, rest of the world, but I left that out because it's not too specific. So if you want to make projections about travel agencies and booking behavior, you have to make distinctions between the geographical areas. In the Mediterranean area, we're expecting to see packaged tours, be it booked via the travel agency, be it elsewhere, whereas elsewhere this will not be the case. Here we see the organizational form in Germany, the structure, about 75%. Direct bookings will be made in 2025, trains or holiday houses, private accommodation, whatever. And package tours within Germany will be the exception. Whereas the Mediterranean area is completely different. Packaged traveling will still be the most important thing. Individual bookings will be increasing slightly, and people not having done anything will be less. So we have kind of a folded world. Now we had the story about the asparagus and the fact that stability is always important when measuring trends. So we have two kinds of results. One thing is stability, so you can rely on this, and the other is dynamics. Now, I'm not going to read through this, but you can see that we have lots of stability in many areas. So we can rely on demand from Germany being large. We can rely on the Germans having the basic same motivation for going on holiday, meaning relaxation. And about 1/3 of them will travel domestically and 2/3 to the rest of the world. And seasonality will also not change much, so the destinations can do what they like. It's going to be the summer. Some will be summer destinations. And demand before or after the season can only be created by new offers which are not competitive here. Otherwise, we have the airline or the car. Nothing else is of much importance on the German market. On the other hand, we have all sorts of dynamic developments which are important, new target groups because of demographic change. And more demand. People will want to go either on domestic travels or long-haul travels. They will know online tools better using the internet. These will be the changes. So we have both sides of the coin, and customers' behavior will also be shaped by motivation. So here we have some advantages here because we have these very long time series we can look back on, and I have this little bit of confusing chart you can see here. So what do? We have a long list every year, and then we have questionnaires, and we ask people to tick off what's most important: relaxation, having time, leisure, being in the nature, sunshine, being together with the family, and that sort of things. And here for January 2015, so only just now, we found the 5 most important issues and the 3 least important ones. And you can see that different colors here. Blue has to do with relaxation, and yellow is having fun, entertainment, sun, good temperatures. Green has to do with nature, and red has something to do with adventures and doing things. So now you can see that motivation basically remains stable, and you can see that blue is very important. It's very important. So relaxation is important. Even if you say there's a different motivation or anything, its most important thing is always to relax. Then in January 2015, you can see some yellow, which used not to be there. So that seems to be a new trend. So that apart from wanting to relax, people are also more interested in being entertained And it's very important to be entertained. So somebody is going to see to it that I will be able to relax, that I'll be entertained, I'll be having fun. So that's gaining importance. Now, we tried to show this in a bit simpler form. So we have a kind of a level of demand we tried to define. So we're trying to calculate how many reasons they gave, how many were ticked. So if many reasons are ticked very often, then that means that's very important. That wasn't so easy because the questionnaires change over the years. But you can see that up to 2000, the demand level has been increasing, and since it's been stable. So we think that probably now the travelers know what they want and how much they want of which. And so this level of demand remains high also in the future. And then we had multi-optionality. We learned about that in connection with the destinations. So the customer himself probably sees so many lovely alternatives that he finds it's difficult to choose. But on the other hand, it's not really important because he'll be happy with anything. So it's not really a problem. So multi-optionality is derived from the different things the traveler may be interested in or where he can have fun with or whatever, and the different destinations. And that means for the travel industry that there's more competition because suddenly the city trip to Strasbourg is in competition with going walking in Austria or going swimming in the tropical island resort close to Berlin. So these are different things, but they're comparable. So we have these three offers competing with each other. And for the consumer, that spells flexibility. And of course, it does mean he has to make a decision and maybe dissatisfied, say, oh, I wish I'd taken the other option. But there's also more flexibility. So what do we learn from all this? These trends down to 2025. And you'll be surprised exactly what I said right in the beginning. And I'm not going to read this out. The main points I already explained to you. So customer centricity and what does the customer want? What are the benefits? I think that is so important. You should take them home with you. So the consumer in 2025 will be a little older. There'll be fewer, but there'll still be some people traveling with children. And there'll be more differentiation. So the customers will always be online. There'll be a bit more difference. They'll be more diverse. And they also are looking for all sorts of different experiences. And they're very highly competent because they have to make 2 or 3 decisions per year. So they make many more choices than when choosing a refrigerator or a car. And we can translate that as follows. Tourism is a future industry. And it builds upon the strong demand, which seems to be safe also over the next few years in Germany. And that's different from other industry sectors. So with mobile phones, it's not sure that in 10 years' time you will have the same amount of demand. You will be selling the same amount of devices as you are selling now. And that is also not the case for all the source markets. Just think of Russia and its breakdown over the past few years. Then the market itself does change. We saw Ryanair's plans. So the providers are trying to change the market, and that, of course, will have an impact on consumer behavior. But Ryanair's plans are only sensible because they build on consumer reliability. And without focusing on the consumers, of course, you can't be successful. Now, tourists, of course, want to satisfy their different wishes. They want to be together with their family on holidays. They want to play with their children. They want to get to know the culture of a different country. That's their motivation. So at a conference like this, what do we talk about? The new apps, sharing economy, sustainability, priceless experiences. That's not of utmost importance for the tourist. The tourist will not go on holiday because it's cheap. He wants to go somewhere, then he'll compare different offers, which will be different in quality and price. And then if the experience which is being promised is similar to the other, then he'll choose the cheaper offer. But he will not go on a trip because it's more sustainable or because it's cheaper or because there's an app. No, those are facilitators, of course, for tourism. But when talking about customer orientation, then we have to go back to the motivation for going on holiday. Otherwise, the whole thing makes no sense at all. So we need a holistic focus on the expectations the customer will have. What does the customer want to experience? And I think that the tourism industry should be very careful about the motivation. Make sure that this motivation will be satisfied, and then also think on what happens afterwards, so that people who want to go to relax will be relaxed, and that people who go on study visits will return with more knowledge than they set out with. And then, of course, I told you about this brochure we have. So you can look at the brochure. You can also visit our website. Please do so. We also have a publication, also with an English summary. That is about last year, and we're also preparing one with the latest developments, but it's just not ready yet. And this is more extensive, by the way. And then we also have the trend study in English and in German, and you will find more information on this on our website. And then we have the new travel analysis with all sorts of different opportunities and possibilities, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for your attention.